What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. As you know, there's a very impactful PTR change coming to a Overwatch Live near you, and this is going to have massive implications into the meta. So what I wanted to do here today is talk about the ripple and butterfly effects that the Mercy and Junkrat nerfs are going to have on the entire game. What heroes does it buff and nerf indirectly, and who's going to be looking at a much better spot when those come live. Now, one caveat is that we don't know exactly what the changes are going to settle on, but I think we know the ballpark of where they're looking to go, especially with Mercy. When Valkyrie was first introduced, it had the value, I would say, of 2 full support ultimates, 3 tempo reses, 20 seconds of Valk Beam. Let's not even remember this, I'm gonna have flashbacks, but they've weaned that back time and time again, and now what they're looking to seem to do is put the difficulty to output scale to make a bit more sense. So as you go up the ranks and get more skillful with the other heroes that are in the support category, you're going to get a lot more output. I won't talk too long about Mercy because I did obviously make a whole separate video about her, but the truth is, at a lot of ranks, for a lot of players, they're not really going to be interested in learning some of the more difficult support heroes, so they're going to be playing Mercy either way. And definitely as you go up the skill curve, the other support heroes simply will just have way more potential value with more skill put in, and that was sort of what we had in Mercy 1.0 anyway. So with that being the case, if we assume that the upcoming Mercy will be similar in power level to Mercy 1.0, we'll still see Mercy a bit in pocket strategies where you're trying to beef up a Widowmaker or a Pharah, but other than that, she's going to be more of a niche tool rather than the be-all end-all hero. So with that being the case, who really fills out that void? Who's going to be the star support? And this is important because the star support of the meta typically dictates what is and isn't good and what follows and what gets countered. Well, 2 things I think are undoubtedly going to happen. One, Lucio is going to be center stage once again, spinning in the 1s and 2s. The Brazilian DJ is going to be getting down and dirty in pro play and have the similar effect that he had in matchmaking. Obviously, because we tried to teach how the pros play and to emulate good teamwork tactics, Lucio is probably going to be back in a position where I'm going to say, pick Lucio, learn to play around it in matchmaking because he's going to be really effective, and he still already was, especially against spam. A lot of people, I think, want to have strong healing, but they really don't think about how the equation works of taking too much damage for too long, where speed avoids taking damage, requiring less healing. Whereas right now, the spam meta is still going to be in full effect. A lot of the spam heroes are still really good, meaning that Lucio, to get away from the spam, is just going to be a no-brainer, now that you don't even have to weigh up against Zen or Mercy. And as well, in general, Lucio just really enables so many different styles of comps. But that leads us to the star off support. Will it be Zenyatta, whose Discord orbs and overall DPS output has been insane for a long time? The reason why the meta we just left was Mercy Zenyatta is because Mercy covered up Zenyatta's blind spot. If you try to dive him, well, Mercy could fly back and save him, and then you're just in a normal DPS duel that you're likely going to lose, making him for like a rock in the backline, something that you really are going to struggle to disrupt. Zenyatta will definitely be good, but I'm more interested to see how the Moira meta develops, because I think as Mercy starts to decline, or instantly declines, I guess, when the nerfs come in, Moira's dual playstyle of either being a major heavy lifting healer, being able to enable a death ball comp, getting a Zarya to survive forever, or to play in that swarmy playstyle that we showed in the Dallas Fuel game. The interesting thing is, if you use a Moira instead of a Zen, the Zen on the enemy team gets more exploitable, because now you have Moira who can kind of sip in and out of combat, launch an orb at him, and he's just dead. There's nothing you can do about it. The guaranteed damage is just so good, and so Moira has like that pick-off potential, but Zen gives you that heavy lifting DPS backline presence. I think those 2 are more or less going to compete because of how reliable they are. The problem that Ana has, even going into this next match, should be a lot better for sure, but there's just so many ways to disrupt Ana's utility. I think Winston Bubble is actually the biggest offender for this. It's on a pretty short cooldown, which is actually sort of a funny thing and a cool tip for you guys out there, that if you're playing Winston, you actually don't ever have to dive the Ana. If you can and kill her, that's fine, but bubbling off her line of sight is way stronger and way easier than it is to potentially get yourself slept trying to fight her yourself. So overall, there's sort of this triangle of off support that I don't think any one of them is necessarily objectively better. but we're really going to see the divergent strategies start to split off because each one really molds your team comp to work differently. If we had to pick, we would say Zenyatta is the strongest, but also since Ana isn't competing with Mercy anymore, well, she's a threat to anti-nade, his ultimate. It's really going to depend on the map and the team composition as well as the personnel that you have in either your matchmaking game or the OWL teams with their personnel lineup. The thing is, we're re-entering a place of Overwatch where positioning and entering into fights snowball again. Because for a while with the Mercy meta, we may have forgotten what that looks like. Getting caught out of position and getting pickoffs really snowball advantages hard. Mercy still has that small opportunity to get a mid-fight res off, but I think we all know that it isn't reliable enough to have a major impact in the meta. I still think Mercy is good in those combo scenarios, and you might even still want to run her on defense if you have a massive respawn disadvantage, because she already gives damage amp like Zen does. I think we'll still see Zen Mercy on a few maps. Like, for example, you'll have Zenyatta for the big defensive ult, and although Mercy is a lot weaker, I think once people realize that you have to use Valkyrie, kind of like you use Nano Boost on defense, you find that engagement, you put the resources in, and you win the fight cleanly with it, and you sort of just keep chaining it and rebuilding it, Mercy's not going to look as bad as you think. And her ability to res in those situations where you would be in a respawn disadvantage and the enemy are going to throw more respawns at you will kind of equalize that downside quite a bit. But in the same way, you can play Ana Zen, which was run a lot of the times on defense as well, if you have a skilled Ana player. Kind of the same exact principles make sense. Ana has a better mid fight, but probably still a worse ultimate than Mercy Valk, because Valk damage boosting another ultimate as well as a big team fight still kind of wins it, just like Nano Boost does. It's more or less going to come down to your mechanical play on both heroes. Okay, let's move on to talking about the DPS characters. We know Junkrat is getting a significant mind nerf, which I think means that he's just less flexible, but not necessarily less potent. What I mean by that is there was times where Junkrat could win a battle in open space because he didn't have to be as accurate with his mind. As long as he got it near you, it did full damage. Well, now it's got fall off, so Junkrat is forced to pick his engagements a bit more intelligently and try to find more narrow fights to get more predictable mind value. So what that means is characters like Genji, Tracer, Pharah now battle him better in open space, but I don't think he by any means drops to irrelevancy. I think he's just more or less where you would expect in the big interchangeable DPS landscape that we have. All the damage characters are good. However, you would probably say that a character like Widowmaker is going to be a little bit less powerful than she was in the Mercy meta, because in the Mercy meta, you needed to get kills basically instantly. You couldn't whittle them down and expect to have an advantage going into the late fight because the res could just come in at any time. You kind of just have to have a low cost frag. Now, getting a headshot is a pretty big cost, but at the same time, you could do it at a safe distance. So Widow could just keep fighting that attrition ranged battle. But there's not really a big reason to do that, because now, since there's no threat of Valkyrie reses coming in instantly, if Genji or Tracer start to overwhelm you, they'll just continue to overwhelm you. And the same things that happened in the mid-fights of the dive meta are still going to carry out moving forward. However, if you're afraid that we're going to get into dive meta again, where Genji, Tracer more or less just blow their way through the enemy team, and those are the sort of the centerpiece of the game, I think it's pretty underrated the backline rigidity that a character like Moira brings. If you have Lucio and Moira, Genji and Tracer can't dive your backline. I think that we're going to be forced to fight your tanks. And if you have a better tank combination and the map allows for that to work, those characters aren't the best at shredding through barriers or a lot of HP. So you could see a very controlling type comp work against a dive meta comp. Because remember, it used to be the case where the most powerful healer, Ana, was more or less pretty diveable. She didn't have an escape, right? She had some skill shots she could hit, but Moira gives like more healing than Ana did and has an escape. So without a doubt, I just don't see us in a dive meta necessarily, despite the strength that I said that Moira has in a dive comp as well. But even in that mirror match, I think you'd have to edge out that the healing orb gets more value played defensively, whereas the damage orb kind of needs to pick off a perfect target. You're going to get more bang for your buck if you play Moira defensively, but she can be played offensively as well. So with that being the case, I think the DPSs across the board are quite equal in terms of viability, and that doesn't mean that their pick rates will all be the same, because the most reliable of them are going to see a bit more play, namely like Soldier and Tracer are just always is going to be quite strong, and there's sort of a counterplay circle that just goes around and round, spiraling out of control, depending on how you counter sort of the standard meta, or depending on what hero you're good at. A character that I think is finally going to resurge a bit is Doomfist. He's got a lot of his bugs fixed, and his playstyle is going to have a lot more power for a few reasons. One, Junkrat is getting quite a nerf, meaning that the fast-moving Doomfist has the potential to dodge his mines, but also the defensive playstyle that the Mercy meta brought is more or less just gone now. We're back to original Overwatch, where getting a man advantage in that pickoff kind of snowballs the fight, and Doomfist can keep digging into the enemy team, finding a kill. And I said since the start that I think he has quite a good synergy with Moira, meaning that a controlling comp that plays around Doomfist's cooldowns, Rein, Zarya, Lucio, Moira, Doomfist, and a flex DPS to counter their DPS, is going to just see some value. If you play that right, it's just going to get kills. But in the same time, any strategy that you can put together, I can start to see make a lot of sense. Genji especially is going to have a major resurgence because it's going to take a lot more skillful Junkrat play to counter him, whereas before that, I think Genji just felt more or less unplayable because he wants to swift strike through you and harass, and Junkrat can just shut down him entirely, and the space that he has to play in is relegated to irrelevancy. But now with that Junkrat mine nerf, I think Genji can start to have a chance in that duel, and we'll see really good Genjis start to Dragon Blade your entire team once again, so look out. But luckily with Lucio and Zen back, you support players will have a way to respond to that. The tanks are quite interesting, as Orisa Hog seems like a really good combination, and I start to question how good it's going to be when the defensive playstyle is starting to get a bit of a nerf. They were kind of the queen and king of sitting back and zoning, essentially. I think that's going to rise or fall based upon the effectiveness of getting flanking angles with DPS. And remember, I think the more stationary tanks were the best targets for instant res. Orisa, Hog, and Reinhardt, I guess, instantly resing them back just gave you a ton of point presence instantly. And now with no instant res in sight, or maybe a limited amount, depending if they buff the PTR version slightly, that's just not really going to be a big area of the game. So Diva Winston is probably going to look a bit stronger, but I think even without the defensive support meta enforcing it, Orisa Hog still catches that quite well on a lot of maps. So I think the tank meta is more or less wide open, and because you can play Lucio, Reinhardt starts to look good again, because Lucio is his best buddy, spinning up the big German to cleave through your entire team with hammer swings, as well as against spam and plenty of other comps. Getting that shield into position makes a big difference, because if you have the restraint that you more or less have to play Mercy Zen, then Reinhardt trying to fight against like Orisa Hog just slowly brings you death. I mean, how many of you Reinhardt players have been experiencing the spam meta right now and just never having a shield for any duration of time? You got Junkrat and Orisa spamming at you and you just can't get anywhere. Well, Lucio is the key to unlock Reinhardt to be really good, because if you take less damage on the point of contact, get your space that you want, get in there and have like over half of your shield and the space you need, well, now you're cooking with gas. Rein can start to swing, pop his shield up when he needs it, and that's where Rein looks really scary, where he still has a shield to go back to, and he can brawl for a while, draw some attention onto him, and then in a moment, swing his shield back up to just pivot and block off a line of sight. That controlling death ball team comp is going to be strong again, and where I think Orisa Hog looks to catch the dive tanks really well, I don't think it looks very good against Reinhardt Zarya at all. I think you just charge the Zarya and get rushed down upon in a very uncomfortable situation, and the Rein Zarya are favored to win, almost purely based upon Lucio being good again. Overall, the tank meta doesn't change too much and sits sort of where I've said in the previous videos of this type, where I think it really does come down to having a really good combination of tanks, because really so much of the game is open. So if the enemy are bringing out a comp that your DPS directly just don't insta-kill or win duels immediately, if you don't have the tanking in order to create some space in between that duel, well, you just kind of lose instantly. But if it's more of a fair fight, it's going to come down to which team tanks more effectively a lot of the time. And also a side note, the Mercy Zen meta was the scariest time for tanks. It allowed for them to have the lowest impact on the game, kind of. I mean, they still were very required, but they could carry far less, because if you're discorded, there's no advantage to having more health, basically. It just cuts off a huge chunk of your health and you get melted, but there's also damage amp to worry about as well. And with that, getting frags as any of the tanks was quite difficult because you yourself were so squishy. But now with Lucio front and center again, there's a lot more of the positioning footsie battle between teams, which is going to allow you to make plays. Like, for instance, if Mercy has the chance to instantly res something, charging in as Reinhardt, hitting something, getting a kill, brawling out, and dying is kind of bad because the target could always just get rezzed. Now you're without a main tank. But with that not a threat, making a play like that has a lot more value. Moving into Season 8, I would say we're looking to have the best meta we've ever had. Oh, is that too early to say? Well, I think it's true because the game has looked progressively more and more compelling, interesting, and well-balanced as time has gone on. We've just had sort of the weird blemish of Mercy dictating most of the game. But even with that being the case, we still saw a ton of heroes in play. And I know if you look purely at the pick rates, you can get deceived in thinking that not a lot of heroes are viable, but the thing is, there's some heroes that are just very reliable, so their pick rates are always going to be high. It's more so about looking at off-meta characters succeeding in certain situations, because that's what you want to see. I mean, even in the Mercy meta, we saw Ana Torb Numbani defenses work, or Deathball Moira comps, and a lot of these other comps were still able to be run. It was just that Mercy Valk was too easy to pass up a lot of the time. And now with that taking a back seat in the game, we can start to see a very wide meta develop. And pocket strats and niche heroes are going to succeed in a variety of different situations. What do you guys think? Do you agree with how I evaluated the upcoming meta? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, please leave it a like, because it really helps us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're going to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.